I always thought we were happy. Sarah and I had been married for 8 years, and while life wasn't perfect, we had built something together that I cherished. She was the light of my life, my confidant, my best friend, or so I believed. Looking back, the warning signs were there. Her phone face down at dinner, the sudden evenings out with friends, the faint whiff of cologne on her clothes that wasn't mine. I ignored them all, trusting her implicitly, trusting her too much. The day I found out was one I'll never forget. I came home early from work, a rare occurrence, with plans to surprise Sarah with dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant. As I walked into our bedroom, my heart stopped. There he was, lounging on our bed like he owned the place, shirtless, wearing a smug grin that made my stomach churn. Sarah was standing nearby, looking more annoyed than ashamed. "Jason," she said, her tone flat, "you weren't supposed to be home yet. Who the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking, my fists clenched instinctively. The man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of arrogance, stood up slowly. He stretched like a cat, completely unfazed. "Name's Brandon," he said casually, extending a hand as if we were meeting at a barbecue. "But most people call me the Alpha." "The Alpha," I repeated, incredulous. "What the hell does that even mean?" He smirked and crossed his arms. "It means I'm the man who's showing your wife what a real man is. No offense, Jason, but it seems like you've been slacking." My blood boiled. My hands twitched at my sides, itching to knock that smug expression off his face, but I took a deep breath. I needed to think clearly. "Sarah," I said, turning to her, "are you seriously letting this guy talk to me like this? In our house? On our bed?" She didn't meet my eyes. "Jason, maybe it's best if you just leave for a while. Brandon and I need to talk." The betrayal hit me like a freight train. My wife, the woman I had devoted my life to, was siding with this clown. I felt my world crumble around me, but as much as it hurt, anger burned hotter in my veins. I wasn't about to let this self-proclaimed alpha walk all over me in my own home. "Fine," I said evenly, my voice cold. "You two talk. But this isn't over." I left the house, but I didn't go far. I parked my car down the street, my mind racing. I couldn't let this slide. Not only had this guy disrespected me, but he had also invaded my home and my marriage. He thought he was untouchable, that he could waltz into another man's life and take whatever he wanted. Well, he was about to learn otherwise. I spent the next few hours planning. I'm not a violent man by nature, but I've always believed in justice. Brandon needed to be put in his place, and I was going to do it in a way he'd never forget. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Later that evening, Sarah left the house, probably to meet him somewhere, and I decided to act. I knew Brandon's type. Cocky, overconfident, and reckless. Guys like him love to brag, and they rarely covered their tracks. I started with his car. It was parked in our driveway, a shiny black Dodge Challenger, practically screaming midlife crisis. A quick glance through the windows revealed a gym bag, a protein shaker, and a smartphone carelessly tossed onto the passenger seat. Amateur move. I used a slim piece of metal I kept in the garage to pop the lock. Within seconds, I had his phone in my hand. Unlocking it was laughably easy. His passcode was 1234. As I suspected, the guy was as smart as a bag of rocks. I quickly scrolled through his messages, emails, and social media. What I found was a gold mine. Not only was he cheating with Sarah, but he also had a string of other women on the side, all of whom seemed to believe they were the only one. Perfect. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to myself before carefully placing the phone back where I found it. Then I moved on to phase 2. Using the information I had gathered, I reached out to one of his other girlfriends, a woman named Melanie. I explained who I was and what had happened. At first, she was defensive, but once I sent her the screenshots, her tone changed. She was furious. Not at me, but at Brandon. We spent the next hour coordinating our efforts, and by the time we were done, I had everything I needed to destroy him. The next day, I called Sarah and Brandon to meet me at a local coffee shop. Sarah sounded reluctant, but Brandon was eager, probably thinking he could gloat some more. "This should be good," he said smugly. When they arrived, I was already seated at a corner table. I'd chosen a spot where we wouldn't be overheard, but where everyone could see us. I wanted witnesses. "Thanks for coming," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized you're right, Brandon. I've been slacking, so I decided to take a page out of your book." He frowned, clearly confused. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. With a few taps, I brought up a video and hit play. It was a compilation of clips and screenshots showing Brandon's messages to Melanie and the other women, interspersed with photos of him and Sarah together. I'd even added some dramatic music for effect. Brandon's face turned pale. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. Sarah's eyes widened as she watched the video. "You've been cheating on me?" she hissed, her voice shaking with anger. Brandon stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I wasn't finished. "That's not all," I said, pulling out a folder from my bag. Inside were printed copies of the messages and emails I'd found, along with a few choice photos. I slid them across the table to Sarah. "You wanted to talk, Sarah? Here's something to talk about," I said, leaning back in my chair. She flipped through the pages, her face growing redder with each passing moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. "You're disgusting," she spat at Brandon. "You're a liar and a fraud." Brandon's bravado crumbled. He looked around the coffee shop, aware that people were starting to stare. "This isn't what it looks like," he said weakly. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I replied, my voice dripping with contempt. "You thought you could walk into my life, wreck my marriage, and get away with it. But here's the thing about guys like you, Brandon, you're all bark and no bite. You call yourself the alpha? You're nothing but a coward." Before he could respond, the door to the coffee shop opened, and Melanie walked in, flanked by two other women I'd contacted. They marched straight to our table, their expressions a mix of anger and determination. "Brandon," Melanie said loudly, drawing the attention of everyone in the shop. "Care to explain this?" She held up her phone, showing yet another incriminating message thread. Brandon's face turned beet red. He stood up, muttering something about leaving, but Melanie blocked his path. "Oh no, you don't. You're going to sit here and face the consequences of your actions." The other women chimed in, each recounting their experiences with him. It was a public reckoning, and Brandon had nowhere to hide. By the time they were finished, he looked like a broken man. As for Sarah, she was in tears. She tried to apologize, but I held up a hand. "Save it," I said. "You made your choice. Now you can live with it." I stood up and turned to leave, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Justice had been served, and the alpha had been put in his place. It wasn't the ending I'd envisioned for my marriage, but it was an ending I could live with. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could move on.